The 42nd floor of the Sterling Hale building didn't smell like a workspace. It smelled like ozone, expensive leather, and the specific icy crispness of air conditioning that cost more per hour than Casey Miller made in a week. Casey adjusted her grip on the industrial floor buffer, the low hum of the machine vibrating through her forearms. It was 11:15 p.m. The city of Chicago was a grid of amber lights below, but up here, it was a ghost town of glass and chrome. Casey was 24, an aspiring graphic novelist with paint stains permanently etched into her cuticles and a student loan balance that kept her awake more than the coffee did. She was invisible here. To the day shift executives, she was a ghost that reset their trash bins. To the night shift security, she was a badge number. But tonight, the 42nd floor wasn't empty. At the end of the long corridor, the double doors to the CEO's suite were thrown open. Light spilled out, along with a sharp, staccato rhythm of pacing heels. Casey sighed, turning off the buffer. She needed to empty the shredder bins in that office. Usually, she would skip it if someone was working, but the head of maintenance, a man named Rick who took pleasure in micromanagement, had written her up twice this week for missed zones. She knocked on the open door frame. "Excuse me. Housekeeping." Victoria Sterling stopped pacing. The billionaire CEO of Sterling Hale Logistics was a fixture on the cover of Forbes and Fortune. In photos, she looked composed, terrifying, and beautiful in a severe, untouchable way. In person, at 11:20 p.m., she looked like a hurricane contained in a tailored Yves Saint Laurent suit. Her dark hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her eyes, a striking, chilly gray, snapped toward Casey with the force of a whip crack. "What?" Victoria snapped. "Trash and recycling, ma'am. Just doing the rounds." Casey kept her eyes on the floor, moving toward the bin near the door. "Not now," Victoria said, waving a hand dismissively without looking at Casey. She brought a phone back to her ear. "I don't care what the regulatory committee said, Marcus. If that shipment doesn't dock in New York by Friday, we lose the Asian market. Fix it. Or I will find someone who can." She hung up the phone and threw it onto her mahogany desk. It slid across the polished surface and knocked over a half-full cup of coffee. Dark liquid cascaded over the edge of the desk, splashing onto the pristine white wool rug. Victoria stared at it, her jaw clenching. She looked up, locking eyes with Casey. "You," Victoria said. "It wasn't a request. It was a command. Clean that up. Now." Casey paused. She was holding a trash bag. The cleaning cart with the stain remover was 50 feet down the hall. But it wasn't the logistics of the request that bothered her, it was the tone. It was the absolute, unadulterated assumption that Casey existed solely to absorb Victoria's mess. "I'll need to get the spot cleaner for my cart," Casey said, her voice steady. "I don't care what you need," Victoria said, her voice dripping with the stress of a failing merger. "I need this office spotless. I pay a fortune for this building's maintenance, and I expect competence. Get down there and scrub it before it sets." Casey felt a heat rise up the back of her neck. It was the same heat she felt when her landlord raised the rent without fixing the heater. It was the heat of dignity being sanded down. "I'm not a dog," Casey said quietly. Victoria blinked, genuinely surprised that the furniture was speaking. "Excuse me. I said, I'm not a dog." Casey dropped the trash bag. It made a soft whoosh as it hit the floor. "I'm the janitor. I clean the building. I don't scramble on my hands and knees because you had a temper tantrum and threw your phone." Victoria's expression shifted from annoyance to a cold, predatory focus. She walked around the desk, ignoring the coffee dripping onto the rug. She stopped 3 feet from Casey. She was taller than Casey, wearing heels that looked like weapons. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Victoria asked, her voice dangerously low. "I could have you fired, blacklisted, and escorted out of this building in 4 minutes. I could make sure you never work in this city again." Casey looked at her. Really looked at her. She saw the designer clothes and the billion-dollar view, but she also saw the dark circles under Victoria's eyes and the slight tremor in her hand. "You think you can bully me because you sign the checks?" Casey asked. She picked up her supplies, slinging her heavy work bag over her shoulder. "My name is Casey. I work 2 jobs to survive, and I have more self-respect in my pinky finger than you have in your entire portfolio." Casey turned toward the door. Clean it up yourself. And honestly, you can go to hell. The silence that followed was absolute. The air conditioning hummed. The city lights flickered. Victoria stood frozen. In 10 years as CEO, no one, not her board members, not her rivals, and certainly not her staff, had ever told her to go to hell. Casey didn't wait for a response. She walked out, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She marched to the service elevator, fully expecting security to tackle her before she hit the lobby. 3 nights passed. Casey hadn't been fired. Every time her badge worked on the scanner, she felt a jolt of shock. She assumed it was a clerical error, a bureaucratic delay before the inevitable axe fell. On Thursday, she was mopping the 42nd floor again. She moved quietly, skipping the CEO's office entirely. She was just finishing the hallway when the double doors opened. Victoria stood there. She wasn't wearing a suit jacket today, just a silk blouse with the sleeves rolled up. She looked tired. "You missed a spot," Victoria said. Casey froze, gripping the mop handle. She turned slowly. "I'm skipping your office. Rick said he'd handle it." "I'm not talking about the office," Victoria said. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "I'm talking about the argument. You didn't finish it." Casey frowned. "I think go to hell is a pretty conclusive ending." "Usually, yes, but—" Victoria hesitated. It was a crack in the armor, brief and terrifying. "The rug is ruined, by the way. I had to throw it out." "I told you it would set," Casey said, refusing to apologize. "You did." Victoria looked down at her shoes, then back up at Casey. "Come in here." "Am I being fired?" "If I wanted to fire you, I would have done it via email on Tuesday," Victoria said dryly. "Come in, please." The please was stiff and used to being deployed, but it was there. Casey propped the mop against the wall and walked into the office. The white rug was gone, revealing dark hardwood. The desk was covered in blueprints and financial reports. "I looked you up," Victoria said, walking behind her desk. "That's creepy," Casey retorted. "That's due diligence." Casey Miller. Art student dropout. Financial reasons. Currently enrolled in night classes at the community college. You did the mural on 18th and Halsted. Casey stiffened. "How do you know that?" "I recognized the style in your sketchbook. You left it in the break room 2 weeks ago. I saw it when I was getting coffee." Victoria picked up a black sketchbook from her desk. Casey's sketchbook. "I thought I lost that," Casey said, reaching for it. Victoria held it out, but didn't let go immediately when Casey grabbed the other end. "It's good. The charcoal sketches of the skyline. They're lonely, but beautiful." Casey pulled the book free. "Why do you care?" Victoria sat down on the edge of her desk, ignoring the chair. "Because you were right." The air in the room shifted. The antagonism remained, but the polarity had flipped. "About what?" Casey asked. "I was acting like a child. I was stressed, and I took it out on the person with the least power in the room because it was easy." Victoria looked Casey in the eye. "It was arrogant, and it was weak. I apologize." Casey stared. She had expected a lawsuit, a screaming match, or a severance check. She had not expected this. "Okay," Casey said slowly. "Apology accepted." "Good." Victoria stood up and walked back around the desk. She picked up a thick file. "Now, get out. I have to save a company." Casey turned to leave, but at the door, she stopped. "You're holding the file upside down." Victoria looked at the folder. She wasn't. Casey smirked. "Made you look." For the first time, the corner of Victoria's mouth twitched upward. It became a routine, a strange, volatile dance. Casey would arrive on the 42nd floor around 11 p.m. Victoria would be there, drowning in work. They would trade barbs. "You're wearing that flannel again," Victoria would say, not looking up from her laptop. "It makes you look like a lumberjack who got lost in a spreadsheet." "This flannel costs $20 and is warmer than your entire personality," Casey would fire back, spraying Windex on the glass partition. They talked about everything and nothing. Casey learned that Victoria ate dinner at her desk every night because she hated eating alone in her empty penthouse. Victoria learned that Casey was saving up for a studio space in Pilsen so she could paint large-scale oils. One rainy Tuesday in November, the building was nearly empty. A thunderstorm was battering the glass, turning the windows into waterfalls. Casey entered the office to find the lights off. The only illumination came from the lightning flashes and the glow of the city. Victoria was standing by the window, her forehead pressed against the cold glass. She was shaking. Casey abandoned her cart in the hall. Victoria! Victoria didn't answer. A jagged bolt of lightning lit up the room, and Casey saw the tears streaming down the billionaire's face. It wasn't a polite cry, it was a silent, gasping panic. Casey crossed the room in 3 strides. She didn't think about the pay gap or the social strata. She just saw a woman falling apart. "Hey," Casey said softly, reaching out but stopping short of touching her. "Hey, breathe." "I can't," Victoria gasped. "The merger, the FTC is blocking it. My father built this. If I lose it." "Victoria, look at me." Victoria turned. Her eyes were wide, unguarded. She looked terrifyingly human. "You aren't your father," Casey said firmly. "And you aren't this building." "I don't know who I am without it," Victoria whispered. "I do," Casey said. "You're the woman who noticed a janitor's sketchbook. You're the person who apologized when no one was watching." Casey took a step closer. The air between them was electric, charged with the storm outside and months of friction inside. "You're arrogant," Casey murmured, lifting a hand to brush a stray lock of dark hair from Victoria's cheek. "And you're difficult. But you're not lost." Victoria leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering shut. "You told me to go to hell." "I did," Casey smiled softly. "I think I'm already there," Victoria whispered. "And you're the only thing here that feels real." Victoria opened her eyes and surged forward. She grabbed the lapels of Casey's flannel shirt and pulled her in. The kiss wasn't tentative. It was desperate, fueled by exhaustion and adrenaline. It tasted like expensive coffee and cheap chapstick. Casey's hands found Victoria's waist, pulling her flush against her. Victoria's fingers tangled in Casey's messy bun, pulling her closer, as if she were trying to anchor herself to the earth. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the only sound was the rain hammering against the glass. Victoria rested her forehead against Casey's. "I'm not going to fire you." Casey laughed, a low, throaty sound. "You better not. Union rep is a shark." Victoria pulled back slightly, her hands resting on Casey's shoulders. She looked at Casey's work uniform, then down at her own silk blouse. She traced the line of Casey's jaw with her thumb. "I finish here at midnight," Victoria said. "Let me take you to dinner. Not at a desk. A real place. A diner. Somewhere with grease and bad coffee." "You hate grease," Casey pointed out. "I'm willing to adapt." Victoria's eyes softened. "Casey, I don't want to be the arrogant billionaire anymore. Not with you." Casey took Victoria's hand, lacing their fingers together. Her rough, callous thumb brushed over Victoria's manicured knuckles. "Okay," Casey said. "But I'm paying. I don't want you holding the check over my head next time we argue." Victoria let out a genuine laugh, a sound that brightened the dark office more than the lightning ever could. "Deal." Casey checked her watch. "I have 2 more trash bins to empty. You have a merger to salvage." Suddenly, Victoria said, squeezing Casey's hand before letting go, "It doesn't seem so impossible." Casey walked back to the door, grabbing her cart. She looked back. The janitor and the billionaire, framed by the Chicago skyline. "See you at midnight, Vance," Casey said. "Midnight, Miller," Victoria replied, and for the first time in years, she sat down at her desk and didn't feel alone.